When historians look back on this overwhelming American week, I would wager they will decide the biggest development over the last 7 days was not the failed attempt by a lone gunman to reach a basement hotel ballroom where the president and more than 2,000 notables were munching on their salad course at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, nor was it even the state visit of the King and Queen to the United States, though we will of course get to that later. But in a week of non-stop developments on multiple fronts here, the biggest news was made by the US Supreme Court.
This is an ABC News special report.
We're coming on the air because the Supreme Court has just released a major decision which could have a profound impact on the midterm elections.
This decision is 6-3, written by Justice Samuel Alito, and it's a significant decision and a setback for the landmark Voting Rights Act of 1965, which was passed to guarantee equality in how we vote.
Part of ABC's coverage there of the decision that came down on Wednesday, it takes a hatchet to the most important piece of legislation to emerge from the civil rights era. Now, this is a huge deal. Don't take my word for it. Listen to what President Lyndon Johnson said on March the 15th, 1965, standing on exactly the same spot where the King gave his speech this week to a joint session of Congress.
There is no constitutional issue here. The command of the Constitution is plain. There is no moral issue. It is wrong, deadly wrong, to deny any of your fellow Americans the right to vote in this country.
As LBJ looked out over the sea of mostly white, mostly male faces in Congress that day, he spoke of the outraged conscience of the nation and the grave concern of the rest of the world over America's violent struggle to achieve full democracy. He knew it was beyond time for America to establish equality, not just in granting African Americans and other minorities the vote, but in making sure that where black Americans lived in the majority, congressional constituencies would be created to reflect accurately the power of their vote. Without it, the Voting Rights Act would have been dead on arrival. This week, 61 years later, the Supreme Court changed all of that, just 6 months before America's midterm elections in November.
Breaking news from overnight. The Washington Post reports that Governor Jeff Landry plans to suspend the May House primary election so that lawmakers can pass a new map first.
Yeah, big development overnight. Been working the phones trying to get more reaction to all of this. The reporting coming after the Supreme Court struck down Louisiana's current congressional district map, ruling it to be unconstitutional.
WWL-TV in New Orleans, they're scrambling amid news that the state's governor, Republican Jeff Landry, is now postponing primary elections due to take place in just a fortnight. Thanks to the Republican-appointed majority on the Supreme Court, he can now redraw the state's congressional maps, reduce the power of black, mostly Democratic Party voters by moving boundaries and creating more reliably Republican districts. Conservative activists seized on the court's decision, urging Republican lawmakers all over the South to do the same thing and basically rig the midterm elections in Donald Trump's favor.
Right now, looking at the map of states in the South that this ruling affects that have not had their primaries yet, we could pick up as many as 13 seats this November.
Caroline Wren of Republican lobbying firm Tactic Global telling the streaming program hosted by the president's former advisor Steve Bannon that Republicans can not only hold on to the House of Representatives in November, but they can now create a permanent majority by engaging in scorched earth jiggery-pokery with the country's electoral maps.
It is time for maximum warfare when it comes to redistricting. Anything less than that is capitulating to the left. Louisiana should be a 6-0 state. Nothing less than that. I don't want to see it.
By which she means that all 6 congressional districts in Louisiana should be engineered to vote Republican. And not just Louisiana, but all over the South. Back in Washington, political leaders of both parties immediately understood the importance of the ruling. Hakeem Jeffries leads Democrats in the House.
Today's decision by this illegitimate Supreme Court majority strikes a blow against the Voting Rights Act and is designed to undermine the ability of communities of color all across this country to elect their candidate of choice.
Now, of course, he knows that his fellow Democrats have been no slouch in the redistricting game. There's a massive legal battle underway right now in Virginia over efforts to create 4 new congressional districts there that would solidly be in the Democratic Party's camp. But at the White House, President Trump knows the Supreme Court ruling is a massive win for Republicans.
I heard Hakeem Jeffries, a low IQ person. He's a very low IQ. Screaming today that the Supreme Court is illegitimate. I mean, that's a dangerous statement. Then if I say something modest, they say, oh, he's a king, he's a king. They're sick.
Says the man who only in February branded the court a disgrace, unpatriotic and disloyal to the Constitution when the same justices struck down his tariffs. Now he loves them, aware that even if he loses in November, protracted legal battles may delay the outcome of the midterms. In those states where boundaries are being hastily redrawn, electoral chaos may be ahead all over again in America. Of course, this was the week when the man who covets being a king met an actual one. The formal arrival ceremony of the King and Queen at the White House on Tuesday, complete with a 21-gun salute as their 4-day visit officially got underway. A kick-off for this year's celebrations marking America's 250th birthday. The whole thing could not have gone any better. From start to finish, the country was beguiled by the King and Queen, and in President Trump's case, possibly beguiled quite literally.
I think he's a phenomenal representative for his country. I think the people in the United Kingdom should be proud. I loved his speech yesterday. I watched it. I loved the speech last night.
Which suggests the president may not have understood the iron fist in a velvet royal glove that lay at the heart of the King's commentary this week on the state of America.
Mr. Speaker, Their Majesties King Charles III and Queen Camilla.
The heart of the King's message was contained in his congressional address, which underscored the fact that the US and UK relationship is measured in decades, not years, needs to be burnished and not renewed and trampled underfoot. He reminded Americans that despite the president's unmentioned contention to the contrary, NATO has been and always will be there for the United States. And in cadences that stunned the chamber, he embedded an oh-so-diplomatic rebuke of the president's authoritarianism in the history of American respect for the Magna Carta.
The US Supreme Court Historical Society has calculated that Magna Carta is cited in at least 160 Supreme Court cases since 1789, not least as the foundation of the principle that executive power is subject to checks and balances.
Democrats in the chamber could not believe it. The King coming to America and indirectly accusing the president of riding roughshod over those checks and balances, seeking himself, his critics contend, to be a king, the move rejected by a real one.
It's sort of like having a headmaster speak to a school.
Presidential speechwriter and historian John Meacham with some spot-on instant analysis on left-leaning MS Now TV.
Magna Carta, the Declaration of Rights in 1688 and 89, informed what happened here in the late 18th century. And what we can't do is lose that in the 21st. And I think that was his central warning, is that this is perilous, these things are fragile, and they require our attention.
But did the message get through to the man who really needed to hear it? Of course not. Even while the King was here, the president was threatening to withdraw American troops from Germany, Italy and Spain, having former FBI Director James Comey arrested and threatened with 10 years in prison for, I am not making this up, a picture of some seashells that the president claims was an incitement to attack him. Trump announced he's putting his own picture and golden signature on some American passports, and he demanded the firing of ABC's Jimmy Kimmel for a pretty lame but constitutionally protected joke about the First Lady.
Our First Lady Melania is here. Look at Melania, so beautiful. Mrs. Trump, you have a glow like an expectant widow.
And the big question, had the fantastic and extraordinary king changed the presidential mind about the UK's Prime Minister?
It helps it from the standpoint that, you know, when you like the king of a country so much, it probably helps your relationship with the Prime Minister. But, you know, in that case, the Prime Minister, I said, do you want to send a little help? He said, no, we'll send it after you win the war. I said, that's not good. That's not good.
And so we return to square one. On the very day the king was making his remarkable speech on Capitol Hill, Washington also heard from Senator John Kennedy, a Trump ally who portrays himself as the foghorn leghorn of American politics. He took to the Senate floor to grouse about the UK's promise to increase defence expenditure only by 2030, and took a scatological, perhaps White House-inspired crack at the Prime Minister.
I can assure you that Sir Keir will not be around as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom in September or October or January of 2030. He's struggling now. His poll numbers, probably shouldn't say this, but it's true. He's polling right up there with gonorrhea in terms of popularity.
Well, that's what you get from a Louisiana Republican. So we need to brace ourselves, because after this week's Supreme Court ruling, a lot more of them will soon be coming to Washington.